The SUV's registration papers lay on our kitchen counter like a declaration of war. My fingers traced the edges of the document, mind refusing to process the words Derek had just spoken. 9 years of marriage, and he still managed to blindside me with his capacity for betrayal. "I've already discussed it with Mother and Father," Derek said, his tone carrying that familiar note of finality. "They need a reliable vehicle, and ours is just sitting in the garage most days." I'm Morgan, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I understood the rules of my marriage. Work hard, provide for our family, and accept that my husband's parents would always have some say in our lives. But this was different. The car I paid for with my bonus? My voice remained steady, though my hands shook. The one I used to drive Emily to her dance classes? Derek adjusted his tie, a gesture I'd seen countless times during our marriage. It usually preceded him choosing his parents over us. "They're getting older, Morgan. They need our support." "Our support?" I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make him flinch. "You mean my support, my car, my money? Don't be dramatic." He checked his phone, probably texting his mother. "Besides, if you fight me on this, we both know where it leads." The threat hung between us, heavy and familiar. Divorce, his favorite weapon whenever I refused to bend to his will. But something had shifted inside me, like a gear finally clicking into place. "Where what leads, Derek?" I stepped closer, watching his eyes widen slightly at my tone. "To you running to Mommy and Daddy? Or to you finally facing the fact that you're a 40-year-old man who can't make a decision without their approval?" "I've made my decision." His jaw tightened. "Either accept it, or we can discuss separation terms with my lawyer." Emily's laughter drifted down from upstairs, where she was probably reading comics in her room. Our 9-year-old daughter, blissfully unaware that her father was willing to tear apart our family over a car he didn't even help pay for. "You know what's funny?" I picked up the registration papers, making sure he watched as I folded them precisely. "I always thought when this marriage ended, it would be over something bigger, not you stealing from your own family to please your parents." "Stealing?" His face flushed. "I'm trying to help my parents." "No, you're trying to buy their approval, like always." I tucked the papers into my pocket. "But here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to call them and explain that the car isn't available. Or I'm going to make sure everyone at work knows how their IT manager handles family finances." Derek's expression darkened. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." I smiled, feeling something cold and calculating settle in my chest. We both know how the board feels about financial impropriety, especially since that audit last quarter. He stared at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw fear in his eyes. Good. He should be afraid, because in threatening to take my car, he'd finally shown me exactly who he was, and more importantly, who I needed to become. "This isn't over," he muttered, grabbing his keys. "No," I agreed, watching him storm toward the door. "It's just beginning." The front door slammed behind him, and I stood in our kitchen, listening to Emily's distant humming upstairs. My hands had stopped shaking. In their place was a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Derek had finally pushed me too far, and now he'd learned what happened when you mistake kindness for weakness. I pulled out my phone and dialed Kara's number. My best friend picked up on the second ring. "Hey," I said, my voice steady. "Remember when you said I should document everything Derek does with his parents? I think it's time to start that file." The memory hit me as I sorted through our financial records. Emily's 4th grade winter play, 3 months ago. She'd played the lead role, a part she'd practiced for weeks. I remembered her small hands clutching the script, her determined face as she memorized each line. Derek never showed up. Mother and father need help setting up their new television. He'd texted 30 minutes before curtain call. No apology, no acknowledgement of what he was missing. Just another moment sacrificed at the altar of Linda and Robert's endless demands. My laptop screen glowed with our joint account statements. Each transaction told a story, not just of money spent, but of priorities revealed. I clicked through months of records, noting patterns I'd been too trusting to see before. My phone buzzed. Kara's name flashed on the screen. "You won't believe what I just overheard," she said without preamble. "Derek's in Jake's office, trying to get him to block your promotion to senior director." My fingers tightened around the phone. "What?" "Claims it would create a conflict of interest with his IT department. Jake's not buying it, but thought you should know." A knock at my office door made me look up. Emily stood there, still in her school uniform, Derek's mother Linda hovering behind her like a disapproving shadow. "I'll call you back," I told Kara. Linda swept into my office without waiting for an invitation. "Morgan, dear, we need to discuss the car situation." Emily's eyes darted between us, sensing tension. I forced a smile. "Sweetie, why don't you go sit at my assistant's desk? She has those colored pencils you like." Once Emily was out of earshot, Linda's pleasant facade cracked. "Derek tells me you're being difficult about the vehicle transfer." Difficult? I kept my voice level, remembering the financial records on my screen. Is that what he calls refusing to let him give away something I paid for? "Family helps family," Linda said, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "Robert and I have always supported Derek's career. Without our connections, without his talents and hard work," I corrected, standing. "Or did you think I wouldn't notice how you take credit for every success he's earned?" Linda's face flushed. "I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate you using my daughter as a prop to ambush me at work." I moved toward the door. "Emily has dance class in 30 minutes, a class I drive her to in my car. Derek mentioned you might be this way." Linda's voice dripped with disappointment. "He said you've changed, become harder, less understanding of family obligations." I thought of Emily's face when Derek missed her play, of the careful way she'd stopped asking if Daddy would attend her events. "You're right, I have changed. I've started seeing things clearly." "Well," Linda straightened her expensive blazer, "I suppose we'll have to discuss this with our lawyer. Such a shame, really. Emily needs a stable family environment." The threat hung there, calculated to make me fold like I had so many times before. But all I could think about was the pattern of withdrawals I'd discovered in our account, all coinciding with Linda and Robert's various emergencies. "Before you involve lawyers," I said quietly, "you might want to ask Derek about those investments he's been making for you, the ones using our joint accounts without my knowledge or consent. I'm sure the IRS would find them fascinating." Linda's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" I smiled. "Then I suppose you also don't know about the second mortgage he took out on our house to fund your latest business venture. The one I never signed for?" She left without another word, her heels clicking rapidly down the hallway. Through my office window, I watched her stop at Emily's temporary coloring station, plant a stiff kiss on her granddaughter's head, and hurry toward the elevators. Emily appeared in my doorway moments later, clutching a half-finished drawing. "Is Grandma mad at you? Come here, baby." I pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, but you know what never changes?" "What?" "How much I love you." I grabbed my car keys, from the desk. "Now, let's get you to dance class. And this time, I think we'll stop for ice cream after." As we left the office, I caught sight of Derek watching us from the IT department's glass walls. His expression was unreadable, but mine wasn't. He'd chosen his battlefield. Now he'd learn what it meant to go to war. The bank statement trembled in my hands, not from fear, From rage, $300,000, transferred from our joint account to a private investment fund I'd never heard of. The transactions were carefully spaced over 18 months, each one just small enough to avoid triggering any alerts. I'd found it buried in a folder labeled Family Trust on Derek's laptop. He'd left it logged in while rushing to another emergency dinner with his parents. Sloppy. The Derek I married would never have been so careless. My phone buzzed. Jake's message was brief. My office, now. The walk to his corner office felt like crossing a minefield. Every step brought another revelation into focus. The second mortgage, the drained college fund, the systematic dismantling of our financial security, all to fund Linda and Robert's endless string of failed business ventures. Jake stood at his window, his reflection grim in the glass. Close the door. If this is about Derek trying to block my promotion, it's worse. He turned, sliding a document across his desk. The board received an anonymous tip about irregular IT expenditures. They're launching an audit. My throat went dry. What kind of expenditures? Hardware purchases, software licenses, all approved by Derek, all supposedly delivered to various departments. Jake's eyes met mine. Including yours. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. Derek hadn't just been stealing from our family. He'd been using my department's budget to cover his tracks. He forged my signatures? Jake nodded. The board wants to interview all department heads tomorrow. Morgan, if these transactions are linked to you, they're not. My voice sounded distant, hollow. But Derek made sure they'd look that way, didn't he? A knock interrupted us. Derek stood in the doorway, his familiar apologetic smile freezing when he saw me. Jake, I didn't realize you were busy. Stay. The word came out like a whip crack. We're discussing the audit. Derek's facade cracked for just a moment. Fear flickered across his face before the mask slipped back into place. I can explain everything. Like you explained the $300,000 you took from our accounts? The words burned coming up. Or should we start with Emily's empty college fund? He paled. You accessed my private files? Private? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make both men flinch. Like the private investment fund you set up for your parents, the one you've been funneling company money into? Morgan, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I turned to Jake. I want to speak to the board today. I have documentation they need to see. Derek stepped forward, desperation cracking his voice. You can't. Mother and father will lose everything. Like we almost did? I pulled out my phone, pulling up the mortgage documents. Or did you think I wouldn't notice you remortgaged our house without my signature? They needed the money. His composure shattered completely. Their business was failing. They would have lost their reputation. So you decided to destroy ours instead? Jake cleared his throat. Derek, I think you should leave, and don't attempt to access any company systems. Your credentials have been suspended pending investigation. The look Derek gave me could have frozen hell. You have no idea what you've done. No, I said quietly, but I'm starting to understand what you did. Every missed school play, every canceled vacation, every time you chose them over us, it wasn't just emotional abandonment, was it? You were covering your tracks. He left without another word. Through the office windows, I watched him walk to his desk, gather his personal items with shaking hands. His phone buzzed repeatedly. Probably Linda, wondering why their financial pipeline had suddenly run dry. The board meets in an hour, Jake said softly. Are you ready for this? I thought of Emily, of the future Derek had gambled away, of all the years I dimmed my own light to keep peace in our marriage. Actually, I said, I think I've been ready for a long time. My phone buzzed with a text from Kara. Derek just left the building. He looked scared. Good, I thought. He should be, because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about justice, and I was just getting started. Jake, I said, turning back to my mentor, there's something else you need to see. Kara's living room felt like a confessional at midnight. Empty wine glasses littered her coffee table, and divorce papers spread across the floor like fallen leaves. Each document revealed another layer of Derek's betrayal, each signature a reminder of my own blindness. He's trying to get custody of Emily, I said, my voice hollow. The legal notice had arrived this morning, citing my emotional instability and vindictive behavior as grounds. Kara set down her glass. He can't be serious after everything he's done? Linda and Robert hired the best family lawyer in the state. My fingers traced the edge of the custody petition. They're claiming my focus on work makes me an absent mother. That's rich coming from them. Kara's phone buzzed. The color drained from her face as she read the message. Morgan, you need to see this. She handed me her phone. On the screen was an email from the company board. My hands started shaking before I finished the first paragraph. They're suspending me? The words felt like glass in my throat. Pending investigation into financial misconduct? Derek's covering his tracks. Kara grabbed her laptop. He's manipulated the transaction records, made it look like you were the one approving those fake purchases. A knock at the door made us both jump. Jake stood there, his tie loosened, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I came as soon as I heard. He stepped inside, holding up a flash drive. But I think I found something that might help. My phone lit up with a text from Emily. Mom, when are you coming home? Dad says we're moving to Grandma's house tomorrow. The room tilted sideways. He's planning to take her tonight. No, he's not. Kara was already grabbing her keys. Because we're going to get her first. Jake plugged the flash drive into Kara's laptop. Before you do anything, look at this. I've been tracking Derek's network activity for the past week. He didn't just forge your signatures. He's been systematically erasing his digital footprint. The screen filled with lines of code and transaction logs. To most people, it would look like gibberish. But I'd been married to an IT manager long enough to recognize a paper trail being covered up. Wait, I pointed to a recurring IP address. That's not our company's network. Jake nodded grimly. It's registered to a shell company in the Caymans, one that received regular transfers from Linda and Robert's business accounts. Money laundering? Kara whispered. Worse. Jake pulled up another document. They've been running a Ponzi scheme through their string of failed businesses. Derek's been using company resources to hide the evidence. My phone buzzed again. Derek, we need to talk about Emily's future. Mother and father have offered to let us stay with them until things settle down. The pieces clicked together with terrifying clarity. They weren't just trying to take Emily. They were planning to disappear with her. I have to go. I gathered the divorce papers, hands steady now. Jake, can you get that evidence to the FBI? He nodded. Already started the process, but Morgan, be careful. People like Derek, when they're cornered. I know. I thought of all the times I'd seen that cold calculation in his eyes, hidden behind his mask of devotion to his parents. Kara, I need one more favor. Anything. Call Linda. Tell her you have proof of their financial schemes. Keep her on the phone as long as you can. What are you going to do? I picked up my car keys, feeling the weight of 9 years of manipulation fall away. I'm going to show Derek exactly what happens when you threaten to take everything from someone who has nothing left to lose. Jake caught my arm. The board meeting is tomorrow morning. They'll want answers. They'll get them. I smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it felt genuine. But first, I'm going to make sure my daughter is safe. And then I'm going to teach Derek's parents a lesson about family loyalty they'll never forget. As I drove home, Emily's text lit up my phone again. Mom, please hurry. Dad's acting weird. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator. Derek thought he could use our daughter as leverage? Fine. He was about to learn that some mothers don't just protect their cubs, they hunt those who threaten them. The anonymous email took 3 minutes to write and 5 seconds to send. By tomorrow morning, Linda and Robert's carefully constructed world would start crumbling, one financial revelation at a time. I sat in my parked car outside their sprawling suburban home, watching through the living room windows as Linda answered her phone. Even from here, I could see her posture stiffen, face draining of color as she listened to whatever the caller was saying. Probably her banker, explaining why their accounts had been frozen pending investigation. My phone vibrated. Jake, FBI received the documentation. They're moving tomorrow morning. Another message followed. Are you sure about this? Once it starts. I didn't respond. Instead, I watched Robert join Linda in the living room, his gestures becoming increasingly agitated as she relayed the news. Right on schedule, Derek's car pulled into their driveway. Time for Act 2. I dialed Linda's number, unsurprised when she answered on the first ring. Morgan, this isn't a good time. I know about the Cayman accounts. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, cold and precise. And the shell companies, and every penny Derek stole to prop up your failing businesses. Silence stretched between us. Then, whatever you think you know, I know enough to make sure Emily never spends another night under your influence. Through the window, I watched her free hand clutch Robert's arm. But we can make a deal. Derek entered the house, and I could see the moment they told him. His shoulders slumped, then straightened with that familiar righteousness I'd grown to hate. What kind of deal? Linda's voice trembled slightly. You back off the custody battle. Completely. In return, I'll make sure certain documents never reach the SEC. You're blackmailing us? Derek's voice now, sharp and incredulous. They'd put me on speaker. No, Derek, I'm protecting our daughter from people who drain her college fund to save their reputation. I watched him pace through the window. You have 1 hour to decide. Robert grabbed the phone. Now, see here, young lady. I ended the call, starting a mental countdown. 3, 2, 1. My phone lit up with a text from Kara. Email sent to all board members. Evidence of Derek's unauthorized access attached. Right on cue, Derek stormed out of his parents' house, phone pressed to his ear, probably trying to damage control with the board. He froze when he saw my car. I stepped out, meeting his gaze across the driveway. Problems? You vindictive bitch. He strode toward me, stops just short of threatening. Do you have any idea what you've done? Exactly what you taught me to do. I smiled, remembering every missed birthday, every emptied account. I chose family over ethics. By destroying yours? No, by protecting what's left of it. I nodded toward the house, where Linda and Robert watched through the window. They've got about 20 minutes before their other investors start calling. Funny how fast a Ponzi scheme falls apart once one person starts asking questions. The color drained from his face. You wouldn't. I already did. I checked my watch. The FBI has everything, but you've got a choice, Derek. Sign away your custody rights now, or I release the evidence of your involvement to the press. You'll implicate yourself in what? Being a victim of fraud? Check the paper trail again, Derek. You were thorough about erasing your tracks, right up until you tried to frame me. His phone buzzed continuously. Probably the board, his parents, his lawyer, all realizing simultaneously that their carefully constructed house of cards was falling. Mom? Emily's voice made us both turn. She stood in Linda's doorway, backpack clutched to her chest. Can we go home? Derek took a step toward her, but my voice stopped him. Choose carefully. Prison or privileges. Your call. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant he broke. Without a word, he pulled custody papers from his car, scrawling his signature across the bottom. "You've changed," he whispered, handing them over. "No." I tucked the papers into my bag. "I just stopped pretending I hadn't seen who you really are." Emily ran to me, and I held her close, breathing in her familiar strawberry shampoo scent. Behind us, I could hear Linda's raised voice through the window, probably realizing their entire financial empire was about to collapse. "Let's go home, baby," I said to Emily, leading her to my car. In the rearview mirror, I watched Derek stand frozen in his parents' driveway, his phone still buzzing with the sound of his world falling apart. Sometimes karma needs a little push, I thought, driving away. And sometimes the best revenge is simply showing someone exactly who they taught you to be. The boardroom felt like a tomb at 8 in the morning. 14 pairs of eyes watched me from around the polished table, each face a mask of professional concern hiding something darker: judgment, suspicion, curiosity. Derek sat opposite me, his lawyer whispering in his ear. The sight of his composed expression made my fingers itch to throw something. "Mrs. Harrison," the board chairman began, "these allegations are extremely serious." "They are." I kept my voice steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "That's why I brought them to your attention." Derek's lawyer cleared his throat. "My client has evidence that Mrs. Harrison orchestrated these financial irregularities herself, using her position to— "To what?" I interrupted, sliding a USB drive across the table. "To expose a years-long pattern of fraud? To protect the company from liability?" The chairman plugged in the drive, and the projector hummed to life. Transaction records filled the screen, each one a nail in Derek's coffin. Or so I thought. "Interesting timing," Derek said softly, "considering your recent actions." My phone buzzed. A text from Kara. "FBI agents just entered the building." The chairman frowned at his laptop. "Mrs. Harrison, can you explain these other transactions?" My stomach dropped as new documents appeared on screen. Familiar numbers, but wrong dates, wrong authorizations, my signature perfectly forged on documents I'd never seen. "That's not—" I stopped, seeing Derek's slight smile. He'd anticipated this, had been waiting for it. The boardroom door opened. 2 FBI agents stepped in, followed by Linda and Robert. The sight of their grieving parent expressions made bile rise in my throat. "Morgan Harrison," one agent stepped forward. "We need you to come with us. This is ridiculous." I stood, turning to Jake for support, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "The evidence has been thoroughly documented," Derek's lawyer said smoothly, "including your attempts to frame my client and blackmail his parents." Linda dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "We just want what's best for Emily." Emily? My heart stopped. "Where's my daughter?" I demanded, but I already knew. The triumphant glint in Robert's eyes told me everything. "Safe," he said, "with family who can provide a stable environment." The room spun. While I'd been focused on the board meeting, on exposing Derek's crimes, they'd been executing their own plan, one that apparently included emergency custody orders and federal agents. "You can't—" I started, but Derek cut me off. "The court disagreed." He stood, straightening his tie. "Given your recent erratic behavior, your attempts to destroy our family business, and the pending federal investigation—" The agent's hand touched my elbow. "Mrs. Harrison, please don't make this more difficult." My phone buzzed again. Kara. "They took Emily from school 20 minutes ago. Linda's car." The carefully constructed web of revenge I'd spent weeks weaving dissolved, leaving only the terrible reality. I'd underestimated their desperation, their connections, their willingness to destroy me completely. "The evidence is real," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "The Cayman accounts, the shell companies." all legitimate business ventures, Derek's lawyer interrupted. Unlike your recent activities. The second agent produced handcuffs. The metal felt cold against my wrists, but not as cold as the realization that every move I'd made to protect Emily had somehow led to this moment. Jake, I pleaded, but my mentor stared at the table, shoulders slumped in defeat or betrayal. I couldn't tell which. As the agents led me toward the door, Derek's voice stopped me. You taught me something, Morgan. He smiled, and for the first time, I saw his father's cruelty in his eyes. Sometimes the best revenge is letting someone destroy themselves. The boardroom door closed behind us, but not before I heard Linda's soft voice. Poor Emily, to think her own mother would go to such lengths. In the elevator, watching my career and freedom disappear with each descending floor, I finally understood. I hadn't been spinning a web of revenge. I'd been dancing in one, carefully constructed long before I'd made my first move. But they'd forgotten something crucial, something they should have remembered from all those years of controlling, manipulating, and underestimating me. A mother protecting her child is never more dangerous than when she has nothing left to lose. The elevator doors opened to waiting reporters, their cameras flashing like strobe lights. Above their shouted questions, my phone buzzed one final time. Kara again. Don't give up. We're not done yet. No, I thought as the agents led me through the media gauntlet. We're definitely not done. The SEC investigator's office felt smaller than my holding cell. 3 days of questioning had led to this moment, watching Derek, Linda, and Robert squirm as Agent Chen methodically laid out their financial crimes. The Cayman accounts were just the beginning, Chen said, spreading photographs across her desk. We've uncovered a pattern of fraud dating back 15 years. I sat silently, watching Derek's face. The mask of righteous indignation he'd worn at my arrest was cracking. His eyes darted between his parents and the exit like a trapped animal seeking escape. This is absurd, Linda declared, but her voice trembled. Our businesses are completely legitimate, including the shell companies in Delaware. Chen slid forward a document. Or should we discuss the investor funds that mysteriously vanished last quarter? Robert's face flushed dark red. We had authorization. From whom? I asked quietly. The same board members you've been bribing? Derek's head snapped up. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I pulled out my phone, playing a recording. His voice filled the room, discussing payment arrangements with a board member. Linda gasped. Where did you get that? Derek demanded. From me? Jake's voice came from the doorway. My former mentor stepped in, looking tired but determined. I've been gathering evidence for months, since before Morgan even knew what was happening. The pieces clicked together. Jake's reluctance to meet my eyes at the board meeting, his apparent betrayal. It had all been covered while he worked with the SEC. You set us up, Robert sputtered. No. Jake shook his head. You did that yourselves. I just made sure someone was watching. Chen produced another file. Mrs. Harrison's arrest was particularly interesting, especially given the timing of certain document alterations made from your home IP address, Mr. Harrison. Derek's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. My client exercises his right to— Shut up, Derek snapped, standing suddenly. This is your fault, he pointed at me. You couldn't just accept your place, could you? Had to keep pushing. My place? I stood too, feeling months of rage crystallize into cold clarity. Was that beneath you? Beneath them? Tell me, Derek, where exactly should I have accepted my place? When you drained our accounts? When you forged my signature? Or when you tried to steal our daughter? We were protecting her, Linda interjected. No. My voice could have frozen hell. You were protecting yourselves, like always, but you forgot something crucial about mothers, Linda. We don't stop fighting for our children, ever. A commotion outside drew everyone's attention. Through the glass walls, I watched Kara escort Emily into the office, followed by a social worker. My daughter's face lit up when she saw me. "Mom!" Derek moved to intercept her, but Chen's voice stopped him. "Mr. Harrison, I wouldn't advise movement right now." Emily ran to me, and I held her close, breathing in her familiar scent. Over her head, I watched the color drain from Derek's face as Chen produced handcuffs. "Derek Harrison, you're under arrest for fraud, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy." "You can't," Linda stood, reaching for her son. "We're family." "Family?" I laughed softly. "Is that what you call this? Because from where I stand, it looks more like a criminal enterprise." Robert lunged forward, but Jake blocked his path. "Don't make this worse." As agents led Derek away, he looked back at me one last time. "I did it for them," he said, almost pleading. "Everything was for them." "I know." I stroked Emily's hair. "That's why you lost everything else." Linda and Robert were escorted out next, their empire crumbling with each new charge Chen listed. Years of manipulation and control, undone by their own arrogance. "Mom?" Emily looked up at me. "Are we going home now?" "Yes, baby." I smiled, feeling the weight of the past months finally lift. "We're going home." Kara squeezed my shoulder as we left the office. Through the windows, I watched Derek being placed in a federal vehicle, his parents following in separate cars. Their carefully constructed world of privilege and deception collapsed around them, while I walked away with the only thing that had ever truly mattered. Sometimes karma doesn't need a push, I realized. Sometimes it just needs witnesses willing to stand their ground and speak the truth. Emily's hand tightened in mine as we stepped into the sunlight. Behind us, the sound of police sirens faded into the distance, carrying with them the last echoes of Derek's betrayal. The newspaper sat unopened on my desk. Derek's conviction splashed across the front page. Linda and Robert's empire had crumbled into federal indictments and frozen assets. Everything they'd built through manipulation and deceit now existed only in court documents and cautionary tales. My office door opened. Jake stepped in, holding a familiar USB drive. "The board reviewed everything," he said. "They want you to take over as chief marketing officer." I touched the newspaper. "Even after everything that happened?" "Because of everything that happened." He set the drive down. "You protected the company while exposing the fraud. That's exactly the kind of leadership they want." Through my office window, I watched Emily at my assistant's desk, doing homework. She'd stopped asking about her father weeks ago, around the time his plea deal made the evening news. "I got a letter from Derek," I said quietly. "He wants to see Emily." Jake's expression tightened. "What are you going to do?" The letter lay heavy in my drawer, Derek's precise handwriting filled with explanations and justifications. The same patterns, even from behind bars. "Nothing." I stood, gathering my things. "Emily deserves better than his kind of love." My phone buzzed, Kara sending a link to Linda and Robert's house listing. Their perfect suburban fortress, now just another asset being liquidated to pay restitution. "You know," Jake said, following my gaze to Emily, "revenge doesn't usually end this cleanly." This wasn't revenge. I smiled, remembering Derek's face when the truth finally shattered his carefully constructed lies. This was justice. "Mom!" Emily bounded in, holding up her math test. "I got an A." I hugged her close, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood. "That's amazing, baby. How about ice cream to celebrate?" As we gathered her things, a familiar figure caught my eye through the window. Derek's lawyer standing in the lobby with a thick envelope. Probably another attempt to negotiate visitation rights. "Jake?" I handed him the newspaper. Could you make sure that gets filed with the other evidence? Someone might need it someday. He nodded, understanding. Some stories needed to be preserved, not as a testament to revenge, but as a reminder of what happens when love becomes a weapon. Emily tugged my hand. Can we get chocolate sauce on the ice cream? Extra chocolate sauce, I promised, leading her toward the elevator. We passed the lawyer, who stepped forward with his envelope. Mrs. Harrison. No. I kept walking, Emily's hand warm in mine. Whatever he's offering, whatever he's promising, the answer is no. Outside, the autumn air carried the scent of change. My phone buzzed again. An email from the board confirming my promotion. Another from our lawyer, finalizing the last details of asset recovery from Linda and Robert's hidden accounts. Mom? Emily looked up at me as we reached the car. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. In all the months of fighting, of exposing lies and surviving betrayals, I hadn't stopped to consider happiness. Yes, I realized, surprised by the truth of it. I am. Good. She buckled her seatbelt. Because you smile more now, like before when... She trailed off, but I understood. Before Derek's masks crumbled. Before his parents' influence poisoned everything. Before truth became our salvation. My phone buzzed one final time. A text from an unknown number. You won. Was it worth it? D. I deleted it without responding. Derek would never understand that this wasn't about winning. It was about breaking free from the echoes of his deceit, about teaching our daughter that love shouldn't require surrender. Ready for that ice cream? I asked Emily, starting the car. She grinned, all traces of sadness gone. Extra chocolate sauce? Extra everything. As we pulled away from the office, I caught a glimpse of Derek's lawyer in the rearview mirror, still holding his envelope of empty promises. But his power, like Derek's, belonged to the past now. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibility and unmarred by manipulation. Not a perfect ending. Those only existed in fairy tales. But a true one, carved from the wreckage of broken trust and rebuilt with something stronger, wisdom. Emily hummed along to the radio, and I joined her, our voices carrying us toward whatever came next. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's simply about choosing your own path and walking it without looking back.